Have you ever played that game Pickup Sticks? Do you remember that when you were a young child that, I remember that can that it came in and it had all these colored sticks inside of it and that metal lid that went on top of it. It was really interesting as I did a little bit of research on this story is that in the 1800s is when this game was created. And it was created obviously to allow children to have some sort of game, something that they could do together with their friends. But if you remember, the object of this game is basically you throw out those sticks and so they land in a pile. And so you take turns to pick up a stick. And so you try very carefully to pick up a stick, not disturbing another stick, because if you disturbed or moved another stick, then you would lose your turn or lose the game. I don't quite remember that. But as I looked at that, I thought, this is how sometimes we live life, is that we play constantly that game of pickup sticks. We do that in relationships. We do that with our tasks in the day. We just kind of throw it into a pile and go picking up one by one, hoping that we won't disturb the other one. So think about this. We all just kind of did that over the holiday season. And I don't know, what your situation is, but we kind of did that. We kind of threw some sticks up in the air in relationships with brothers and sisters and moms and dads and children and in-laws and outlaws and all of those things. And we kind of tossed those up in the air and we tried very carefully not to disturb the other. Hi, my name is Melody Westbrook and I'm here with you at The Walk. And today we're going to talk about pickup sticks and picking up sticks. So if you've been able to follow along in the story of Elijah that I've been kind of rolling out for you, you'll remember that God had told Elijah to go down to the river and to spend some time down at the river. And we don't know exactly how long that was, but it was about 2 years. And so that was, a couple of reasons. One is to protect Elijah from Queen Jezebel, who was trying to kill all of the prophets. And number two, I believe that God was preparing Elijah for the things that were coming ahead, things that were in his future. So finally, it came to that point where God said, okay, Elijah, it's time for you to move. So it's really interesting where God told Elijah to move is that he had him go a little north. And so he had him enter into enemy territory. And I believe that sometimes in our lives that God allows us or pushes us or provides for us to enter into our enemy's territory because those are opportunities that we can see God's strength inside of us. So Elijah enters into enemy territory, but it's really interesting is that God had already spoken to a widow, to a lady who didn't believe in God. She didn't have faith in the one true God, but God had spoken to her that Elijah was going to come, and God had commanded this widow to feed Elijah. So that's where we're going to pick up the story today. So listen as I read just a little bit from the scripture in this story out of 1 Kings chapter 17. And so as Elijah approached the widow, this is what she said. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we will eat it and die. And as I was reading this and doing a little bit of research for myself, I began to put myself into the place of this widow. So I want you to do that today, is think about what was that widow thinking? At that moment in her life, she was gathering a few sticks. But what she was doing is she was gathering a few sticks to go home and to prepare the last and final meal for her and her son. Can you imagine what that would have felt like? And she knew that it was inevitable that they were going to die. They were down to their final things. And so she was gathering these sticks for starvation for her and her son. Now, I did a little bit of research on starvation. As we know, that is a slow and very painful death. So one by one, as she's picking up these sticks, I can imagine what was in her mind of how painful this was going to be, how horrible that this death was going to be as a mom, as she had to watch her son die and allow herself to die. So starvation begins to, what it does is it begins to eat at your organs, and then your organs begin to shut down one by one. And it takes about 30 to 50 days before you reach that final death. And so that fear that must have been inside of her had to have been incredible, reaching down and picking up those final sticks. But I look at that in our lives and how often we do that in our lives and in relationships or a dream that you've had maybe all of your lifetime. And we come to that point where we are reaching down and we are picking up those final sticks, knowing that we're going to die. This dream is going to die. That relationship is going to die. And as this woman did this, she didn't have the hope in God. And so that's some of the things that I want us to take a look at, is what happened to that widow and what happens to us. So when you look at this story in 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 11, Elijah says to her, as she was bringing the vessel of water, Elijah had asked for some water and some bread. And as she was bringing it to him, he called to her and he said, "Oh, and bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." Again, can you imagine what this widow felt? You don't understand. I am picking up my final sticks, and you ask me to bring you bread? So this was her reply. And she said, "As the Lord," and capture this word, "as the Lord your God lives." It's not my God. This is your God. "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked. I only have a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. And now I am gathering sticks." All that was left were the crumbs. All she had left was a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil. I have a story in my life that a few years ago, all I had left in my life, in my marriage, were crumbs. My husband and I had started a church in 1991, and we started with 3 families, and this church had exploded. It was big. It was a big church. But unfortunately, we had a big church, but we had a little marriage. All the time and the effort and the focus had gone into building this church, and we kind of left our marriage on the side. So all that I had left as a wife were crumbs. And I looked at my crumbs and I realized there just wasn't much left. So I went to my husband, I approached my husband, I tried to tell my husband, and it was difficult. It was difficult because there was so much focus that was taking place in this church. And as I looked at my crumbs, and sometimes we look at our final crumbs, and that's our survival. That's all that we have left. And as I looked at my crumbs, I gave him a choice. And I said, we either focus on our marriage and take a look at our marriage, or I'm done. And as I was saying these 2 things to him, I was suitcase in hand, and I walked out that door. You see, there are times when we have to pick up sticks. And as I walked out that door that day, I was picking up what I felt like were my final sticks. This year, as we have said goodbye to 2023 and we're entering into 2024, there are things in some of our lives that we feel like we are picking up our last and final sticks. We're just like that widow. I just need to pick up a few more sticks. And once I do, I'm going to head home and I'm going to die. The situation in my life, this relationship in my life, this dream in my life is going to die. It's an incredibly hopeless feeling. So what I want us to do next week, I want you to join in with me because we're going to take a look at what happens in this story with this widow. But for now, I want you to settle into this. I want you to look at your life and to see, are you picking up sticks right now? Are you picking up those final sticks because all that you have left are crumbs? And what we're going to look at next week, we're going to look at the continuation of the story and what happened in her life. But we're also going to take a look at what we call necessary endings, because sometimes there are necessary endings in our life. But we're also going to take a look at the hope that we can have. So join me next week on The Walk as we continue the story of this widow. Thanks for joining me tonight.